Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Hope you guys do enjoy today's video as we discuss the worst futures in the NBA. Now this is one of my favorite mini series that I record each off season. I had a video come out before the NBA draft and before NBA free agency, and now I'm making tweaks and adjustment to that same list where we look at the teams with the worst futures in the NBA. In my previous video I had 4 teams. In this one, well, it drops down to just 3 teams with the worst futures in the NBA. There are 3 teams specifically I want to highlight, talk about from a long-term outlook in this video. And it really comes down to how do you individually define worst. For example, if you're stuck in the middle, if you're mediocre like, say, the Washington Wizards were for the last 6-7 years, well, that would be really, really terrible because you're not lining up for top picks. You're also not in a position to actually push for an NBA championship. So that is terrible. Right now, I don't think we have a ton of those kinds of teams currently. Obviously, the Utah Jazz kind of exist, but they have a ton of draft picks from Cleveland and Minnesota as well. So I do think they have some pivotability if they do want to find a way toward the top of the draft. And obviously this year they might even be in position for that themselves. So for me, especially in this video, I'm talking about the teams with the long-term potential to fall all the way down to the bottom for a while in the NBA, which is very, very scary, especially when you owe so many draft picks out the door. Now remember, things can change very quickly in the NBA, so it takes 1 or 2 very savvy, smart moves to completely redefine the direction of your organization. It takes one other team to massively overpay in a trade. It takes one free agency signing. A lot of things can change very quickly, so we're going to talk about that as well in this video. Now again, if you guys do enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. Now let's jump into it here with team number 3, the team with the 3rd worst future in the NBA, in my opinion, and that is the Milwaukee Bucks for a few different reasons. First of all, their team is extremely old. When you look at their predominant core on their roster, their core 4, they're all well into their prime, right? They're well past their prime in some cases, even looking at Brook Lopez, maybe even Chris Middleton. You have a head coach who has proven time and time again to not be able to adjust quickly and on the fly in the postseason. He has one NBA championship under his belt, of course, with the 2008 Boston Celtics. But other than that, Doc Rivers has been coaching so many Hall of Fame level talents without seeing really a ton of conference final success. Thinking back to coaching James Harden and Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey in Philadelphia, coaching multiple different renditions of the Los Angeles Clippers with Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. That team never came to fruition, obviously. Then you also look at the flip side of that with Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan. That team never really got where they were maybe capable of going under Doc Rivers with multiple 3-1 blown leads. Doc Rivers does not have a great coaching resume, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. So you think back to his Boston tenure, even the one year he won it obviously was the biggest year of his coaching career. But outside of that single season, there's been a lot of playoff disappointments. Obviously, I don't have to tell you guys that. And then looking at this roster, it's not really set up in a way for a ton of flexibility. Now, they did draft a couple of young guys, and I did really like their additions this offseason. They signed DeLon Wright. They also brought in Taurean Prince and Gary Trent Jr. I think Milwaukee did about as good as possible given their circumstances of being a team well into the tax, a team that has a ton of money committed, especially to these core 4 guys. Damian Lillard, that trade is still a big question mark for them. Their defense really slipped after letting go of Drew Holiday and Grayson Allen. Something that doesn't get talked about enough in that trade is the fact that Grayson Allen also got routed to Phoenix in that. Damian Lillard, I think a great player, obviously a fantastic individual talent, but it's been a long time since we've seen him really even in the playoffs because of some of the shortcomings throughout the regular season, especially on the defensive end of the floor that he's been a part of. Giannis Antetokounmpo, his health has been slipping as of late. Missed really the last 2 postseasons, or at least parts of the last 2 postseasons with injuries. So that's a big question mark, especially with the way that he plays. Now, Giannis is still the franchise savior, and this is where one big trade could completely reshift their future. If they did at some point trade Giannis to a team and get, say, 5-6 first-round picks, this list would look completely differently. But the question is then, are those picks that they're getting back in return for Giannis going to be very high-level picks, or are they going to be picks from a contending team? And that's a very difficult question to ask right now. And then also the reality is you don't want to have to trade Giannis away. He is your best player in franchise history, depending on how you rank him in, obviously, Kareem. I think it's a very big question here for Milwaukee if, one, they're going to be able to retain Giannis long term, just looking at the average age of their roster. And even though I do like some of their additions in Taurean Prince, Gary Trent Jr., they are on short-term contracts, so this doesn't really help for the long-term future. It does definitely make their team better now. And remember, I'm looking at this more as a long-term, who could possibly bottom out and become one of the worst teams in the NBA. I think Milwaukee's really in a danger zone here because of how many draft picks they owe out the door. Thinking back to some of their previous trades, the Drew Holiday trade, the Damian Lillard trade, the two that definitely accelerated that clock a little bit more. And they've let some talent walk out the door too. Trading Dante DiVincenzo for Serge Ibaka is one of the biggest head scratchers in recent memory, in my opinion. I just didn't understand it when they did it, and I really still don't get it now, especially when you look at how DiVincenzo is playing for the New York Knicks presently, and how Milwaukee probably could use a player like that in their building currently. So I think Milwaukee just kind of a question mark right now for me long term about how they go from where they're currently at, which is, yes, maybe a potential contender this year, but how do they kind of extend that throughout the next 4 or 5 years? How do they keep Giannis Antetokounmpo happy and content there in Milwaukee? I know he did sign his extension, which is very good. That helps Milwaukee a ton in trade leverage if that ever comes to be the route they have to go. But listen, Milwaukee's a very good team right now. I just have a lot of concerns about how they're going to continue to be a good team over the next 5 to 7 years. Number 2, in that same vein, the Los Angeles Clippers, who are officially kind of in the middle ground here. They're a good team still. They are, especially with James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. They are definitely poised to win quite a few games again this season. But with Paul George out the door, a couple of new additions in Chris Dunn and Derrick Jones Jr., and also the key piece of Ivica Zubac. You could also include maybe Terrence Mann into that, although I think he's a little bit overhyped by Clippers fans. I think the Clippers are in a very interesting, unique spot in the entire NBA because they don't have access to a majority of their draft picks. Obviously traded one to Philadelphia for James Harden. Still Oklahoma City, a bunch of picks from the initial Paul George trade back from the summer of 2019. So we're really in a spot where the Clippers don't have a lot of control over their future. Their two best players are well into their 30s with some real injury history. James Harden, obviously, his hamstring that he injured in Brooklyn during the postseason has really hampered and dampened his career over the last couple of seasons. He's still a very good player. I think in the playoffs we saw how effective he can still be as a 1 or 2 option. In the NBA, he was extremely good against the Dallas Mavericks. In fact, he was the Clippers' best player in that series. But obviously, Paul George just did not show up in that series much. And then Kawhi Leonard obviously didn't either with his injuries, which is becoming too much of a theme. So it's very fair to worry about the Clippers long term, just from the component of their top 2 players are injury prone a little bit at this point and older. It's going to be kind of scary for LA to kind of finagle and move across this era of having to find the next iteration of Clippers basketball post Kawhi Leonard, post James Harden. Now, that's not going to come in the next year or 2, but I think over the next 4 or 5 years, that is going to be a big question for them. I did like the additions a lot of Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn. Something I thought was very obvious is the attention to point of attack defense. The Clippers wanted to get switchier, they wanted to get lengthier, they wanted to get more athletic. They definitely did that. Chris Dunn is one of the better point of attack defending guards in the entire NBA. Now, he is a little slight, obviously, for his positional flexibility. It's not as elite as some of the other best guard defenders in the league, but he is still very, very good. He's got quick feet. He's able to stay in front of guys, cut off driving lanes, and pick up 94 feet. He's an impressive defensive player. Derrick Jones Jr. obviously took a big step forward this past season playing for the Dallas Mavericks. Having a consistent role on a contending team, I think, was really beneficial for him. And playing with a passer like Luka Doncic really was able to maximize a lot of Derrick Jones Jr.'s athleticism, catching lobs above the rim, playing in transition more, hit-ahead passes. That's something James Harden's very, very good at. You think back to his time in Philadelphia, playing with Tyrese Maxey, it just felt like James Harden did a good job triggering outlets. Now, he didn't do it all the time, didn't do it super consistently. Harden does like playing his own speed, playing his own pace, walking the ball up the floor a bit. But when he does actually look ahead and throw those hit-ahead passes, he is one of the better players in the NBA when he's actually doing so. And I think Derrick Jones Jr., again, could be the beneficiary of an elite point guard's passing ability. And that is going to be Harden here to a T, throwing lobs to Derrick Jones Jr. Now, he's not the same caliber player as Luka Doncic. It is going to be a little bit of a drop-off for Derrick Jones Jr. in terms of probably his overall efficiency this year, and also the overall volume he has, if I had to guess. But I still do think he's in a spot where he's going to be able to succeed and thrive there in LA. Zubac is probably their franchise cornerstone going forward at this point, which kind of points to why they're, in my opinion, the second worst future in the NBA right now. But here's the one thing, and this is the trump card that Steve Ballmer and the Los Angeles Clippers have. They have the ability to go out and sign big free agents. So in a couple of seasons, who could that be? Could they try and make a push at an Anthony Edwards down the road, a Tyrese Halliburton down the road after their current designated rookie max extensions end? That's a long time from now. That's 4 or 5 years from now for those specific players. But the Clippers, I think the biggest thing that they did when they made the trade for Paul George and signed Kawhi Leonard, they put themselves on the map as a destination, a landing spot for other teams in the NBA, for other players in the NBA to consider going to. Do you want to live in LA? Guess what? The Lakers maybe don't have cap space. Maybe they don't have this, that, or the other thing. We have a brand new arena, the Intuit Dome. The Clippers are going to be able to spend. They're going to be able to attract lucrative players and big name players. And I think that will be the telltale sign here for the Los Angeles Clippers on how they look to move forward post Kawhi Leonard, post Paul George, post James Harden, post this current iteration of their roster. The Clippers will have to be creative. They're going to have to get a little bit lucky as well with how the free agency classes in the future shake out. But with how they've handled the additions of Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and so on, they have put themselves on the map as a destination once again and a landing spot for potential stars in free agency. Now the team with the worst future in the NBA, and it is single-handedly, solely, obviously, the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are currently, in my estimation, doomed long-term. Matt Ishbia is the worst owner in all of professional sports. He is completely incompetent and has no idea how to run an NBA basketball team. And it is very obvious with the collection of decisions he has made since purchasing the Phoenix Suns, including his first or second day on the job, trading out Mikal Bridges, 4 first-round picks, Cam Johnson, a bunch of quality players and quality talent, young, controllable talent out the door in order to land Kevin Durant. And his bet was Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, with an aged, not great roster around them, would be good enough to win an NBA championship, or at least really truly contend for an NBA championship. Well, guess what? They did that. They won a total of 2 games in the second round that year, and then lost to the eventual champion Denver Nuggets. After that, instead of maybe looking at that and saying, wow, I mortgaged a lot of my future, maybe we have to find a different way to pivot and acquire talent for cheap, he decided to step even harder on the accelerator, going after Bradley Beal, who had, yes, a no-trade clause, and still does, by the way, even though they could have gotten him to decline that no-trade clause going forward. They did not have him do that. He still has his no-trade clause. Now Matt Ishbia is in a spot where he traded a bunch of draft pick swaps out the door, even traded one for David Roddy. He's made a bunch of questionable decisions for players that he did not have to give up that much to go get out on the market. Now the Phoenix Suns are ultimately the team with the worst future in the NBA long term. I feel terribly bad for Devin Booker, who, in my estimation, still has a tremendous amount of talent and a really, really great outlook for the next 5, 6, 7 years of his career individually. But the problem here is he had a team that was very well built. They were able to go to an NBA Finals. And now instead, a couple of years later, that roster looks completely differently. There's not a lot of rim protection. There's not a lot of rebounding. There's not a ton of defense. Their best defender on the roster is rookie Ryan Dunn, who we'll see how much he even plays, because there are some real offensive woes in his game as well, as you guys can remember from my pre-draft analysis. The trade for Bradley Beal is really the stake in the ground here for the Phoenix Suns, and I said it when they made this trade. Trading for a player making as much money as Bradley Beal with the understanding of what the new CBA is going to be was a complete detriment to this Phoenix Suns organization. There's a lot of work to be done to pull this team out of the ground. The Phoenix Suns are in such a terrible position. I don't see really any true way that they could free themselves from this situation other than completely bottoming out, which would mean probably trading Kevin Durant, maybe even considering trading Devin Booker, who is the cornerstone of your franchise, both from an age and longevity standpoint, he's been there, he's done that in Phoenix, he's a very beloved player there for that organization. And then they tried to step on the accelerator around him without really looking at the long-term consequences of all the draft picks they traded and the talent they traded as well. That's one of the most overlooked things when you talk about a trade for Kevin Durant. Giving up Mikal Bridges, your best point of attack defender at the time, giving up Cam Johnson, one of your best floor spacers, has really put them in a bind in terms of their overall collection of depth and talent. If you would have went out and made the trade for Durant using draft picks and expiring salary or something, that's a completely different topic of discussion. Now that Mikal Bridges has been retraded by the Brooklyn Nets, I think we can truly really see what kind of value Phoenix gave up in a deal to get Kevin Durant on their roster, and then doubling down on that to get Bradley Beal is just nonsense, to be completely honest. I caught a lot of flack last offseason, people saying that I was sleeping on the Phoenix Suns, that I was overlooking them. They got swept in the first round, okay, by Minnesota, the first postseason series sweep in Minnesota Timberwolves history. So I think, needless to say, the Phoenix Suns currently aren't that great of a team, and their future looks even more bleak when you consider the fact that they don't have access to draft picks. The Bradley Beal contract is horrid. Kevin Durant is very well into his 30s, and Devin Booker is probably stranded on Phoenix Island right now. Obviously not a real island, but it feels that way for him currently with the way that things have played out here under Matt Ishbia, who is, again, like I said, immediately talking about the Phoenix Suns, incompetent, not fit to run an NBA team, has no clue what he's doing, and should never have bought the Phoenix Suns to begin with. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. Comment your opinions down below. Who has the worst futures in the NBA in your opinion? There are a few teams I also considered for this video, but did not ultimately include. I thought the combination of Milwaukee, LA, and Phoenix all kind of fit a pretty good theme in this video of talented teams currently that have some real long-term flaws in their roster construction and their draft pick capital that they currently hold going into future seasons. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.